friends. I hope you're having an amazing day. I wanted to take some time to talk about endings, happy endings, imperfect endings. Now, in my last video, it was pretty long, so if you didn't watch it, I understand. But I shared my experience of my book launch, and how it was good, it was bad, it was everything in between, and how I had learned so many lessons on that journey of planning it, and it was just so full of success and failure and everything in between. So I didn't come out of it feeling like there was a conclusive happy ending. Really, I accepted an imperfect ending that was still to be continued. I got a bunch of extra books sent to me that I had to find a home for. I had to still have some merchandise that I was dealing with, and it was just this really interesting experience where I thought that, I would just put on the show and then it would be over. But it really ended up being this really complex network of lessons and disappointments and successes and everything in between, right? So something interesting actually happened last weekend. I got an invitation to come to kind of a group art show, to bring my books and my prints and anything I had left over to this group art show that was actually at the exact same venue as my book launch. So the way that had even happened is the guy who did my canvases for me, because I had some canvas quotes stretched for the event, he had come to drop the canvases off for my book launch day, and then he saw the space and he said, "Oh, I have really wanted to get together all the people I print canvases for and just artists in the city, and I'd like a space." So he ended up renting that space. So a bunch of months later, he had this event planned, and he invited me to it. And I was just, the night before, I just couldn't figure out whether I wanted to go. I didn't know whether it would be an act of self-respect not to go, because as I mentioned in my last video, I thought part of the kind of incongruity was between me and the venue. I didn't feel like the venue was in the best location or had the best setup for the things that I wanted it for, right? And so I thought, okay, well, I had kind of learned my lesson about this venue. Am I going to go back there? But then another part of me said, a venue is just a venue. There's no inherent worth to to a venue. Really, it's about the people that come there. It's about the event that gets put on there. And why not? Why not try? Why not? I mean, what do I have to lose by bringing a bunch of books? Maybe meeting some new people. So I really couldn't decide. And the night before, I literally just didn't set an alarm, and I said, okay. He said it would be good to come around time X, so I'm just gonna go to bed, and if I wake up in time to make it to this thing, then I'll go. If I don't, I won't. And it wasn't really just leaving it up to chance. I mean, I'm a very light sleeper, and I also know if I'm even a little bit excited about something, I will wake up early. So I've been recording the audiobook for The Art of Talking to Yourself for the past few days, and I just can't sleep 8 hours. I'll just wake up earlier and just be ready to go, right? So for this, I did. I woke up earlier than I thought I was going to, so I said, okay, fine, I'll go. And oh my gosh, it was such an experience. If you check out my videos, you'll actually see that I did kind of an impromptu speech and a little reading of the book. I gave a book away. Somebody did an amazing performance to get the book given away to them. But most importantly, it was just a space full of art and full of these amazing people from the city of Toronto whose art handles the similar topics to my book, which is interesting. That's what my book launch was supposed to be, just a bringing together of artists whose work reflects my book. But I just, don't spend enough time in Toronto, or didn't have enough connections to really get that many artists in there But here it was at the same venue. It was the same kind of concept. So it was just dozens of people whose work, whose music, I mean, there were musicians who performed, and their music, I mean, I might as well have written those words. I mean, they were so touching and so in line with the journey of self-discovery and self-love and consciousness and healing our minds. It was incredible to be, even in that energy, you know, as it built up throughout the day, and there were more musicians, more artists, more people whose art represented these viewpoints, these explorations of the human condition. And I think by the end of it, I mean, have you ever been so happy that you just go a little numb because it's so many good feelings at once? That was me by the end of the day, and I couldn't help but think, oh my gosh, and I was gonna maybe not go to this. I mean, I learned that there is a community of people in Toronto that I just feel so connected to. And it was a huge breakthrough for me, because even going to that event, a few days later, I decided to go to a meetup in Toronto, the Live Your Legend meetup. You guys maybe have heard of it, because they have them in different cities. And I have sort of been holding off on it. An old client of mine recommended it, and that was amazing. I mean, it's just another amazing bunch of people who I feel so connected to in a different way, but still really connected to. So I think what going to that event really helped me do is break through this mental block of, oh, there are no people in Toronto that I feel really, really connected to. I mean, there's so many people, so many communities I feel connected to. Even my audio engineer for recording this audiobook, she and I have had this amazing rapport, and I just feel so connected to her. And I can't help but think, so really my moral of this story is, I can't help but think that this wouldn't have been possible. This outcome of, you know, realizing that there's a community for me in Toronto, and maybe even multiple communities, and making the effort to go out and meet them, and then introduce them to my book and have everything be so tangled together, that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have the book launch in the first place. So the book launch was an imperfect experience. I mean, it was compared to my first book launch, which is something I have done that. You know, I've gathered people together to just listen to me talk about my book, but I hadn't actually planned an art event before, right, or anything to do with the arts. So for my first art event, it wasn't the most successful it could have been, because I was inexperienced, I didn't know what I was doing, but I put my foot in there, and I decided to learn from it. I decided to, you know, kind of branch my roots out and take some lessons out of it, and accept the imperfect ending, right? Accept the kind of to be continued after my book launch, and be so at peace with that, and just keep going day after day, you know, learning lessons and going throughout it. And that has led me directly to the event, the art show I went to last weekend, where I met amazing people. I sold so many books. I had just it was such a heart and mind opening experience for somebody that works behind a computer for most of the time. It was incredible, right? But that wouldn't have happened if after the imperfect experience of, you know, doing something for the first time, I would have said, well, maybe it's not for me. You know, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I should just never do it again. Maybe if I had concluded, you know, the venue was wrong, period, you know, it's hard to sell art, period. It's hard to sell art and books together, period. It's hard to find like-minded people in Toronto or a big city, you know, period. If I had kind of made those conclusions, those self-protective conclusions out of this experience, I never would be feeling as good as I feel right now. So really the moral for me is accept the to be continued ... Accept the imperfect ending, you know, but learn from every experience, because you never know. If you accept the imperfect ending, eventually you will get a happy one. And I really believe that, because I think if we're willing to learn from all of our mistakes, right, from all of the feedback we get from life, then eventually it's only a matter of time until we find ourselves in a space, in a time, in a situation where we feel like everything just lines up and everything just feels good. Because in order to have that kind of moment, you have to keep putting yourself out there, right? And if you don't accept the imperfect ending and you say, you know what, if it's imperfect, then I can't, I can't take it, right? I just have to cut it off and stop doing it. If it's imperfect, then it's a failure, right? But if I allow it to be continued and I allow myself to learn from those things, then I keep putting myself out there. I keep putting myself into those situations where I can meet certain people and get certain connections and learn certain things and see more and do more. And I have to say, the guy who organized the event that I went to, I think even knowing him, even being connected with him, right, and having that relationship be established, somebody who knows how to plan an art event and who has these branches out in the art community, I mean, is that not worthwhile? Is one relationship not worthwhile? Right? So I hope if you get anything out of this, it's that if you feel like you're just going through a series of failures, I hope you don't see them as that. I hope you see them as this kind of the imperfect ending to a chapter, right? When you're reading a book, until you actually get to the end of the book, like a fiction book, it's all just kind of building up. Like you might have a kind of epic ending to a chapter. You'll notice I like to do that in my work. I like to have these epic endings to every chapter. So there's the kind of a wrap up on the chapter, but it's not over yet. You still have this bit of tension inside of you that's like, oh, okay, but what happens? What's next? How is it all gonna conclude? So I ask you to look at those failures and those mistakes and all of those imperfections as just, maybe that's the wrap up on that situation, but there's another situation coming. If you stick with the story, you stick with what it is that you set out to do, you stick with your goals and your aspirations, you stick with, what is it that I really want to do in the world, if failure and all of that, if that has no bearing on me, what is it that I really want to accomplish, right? And just have it in mind, maybe this is just not the end, right? If it's turning out like this, maybe it's not the end yet. Maybe I'm just on chapter 6, but chapter 6 is an essential part of the entire book, okay? Maybe I'm on chapter 7. Maybe I'm getting near the last chapter. I mean, what this has really reminded me of is, and I'll leave you with this because this is such timeless wisdom, an old roommate of mine, she said, everything's okay in the end. And if it's not, then it's not the end. And I know that's probably been said a million times by a million people, but I guess that's what I've learned really over the past few weeks, that I decide when the end is. If I'm just willing to keep reading the chapters of my life and stick with my story and stick with what it is that's important to me, stick with my plot, then there is a happy ending coming. And that's a beautiful thing, Well, thanks for sticking with me through my story. I tried to make this one shorter than the last one. If you have any thoughts on this, please comment. I love when you guys engage and talk to me. Bye.